Thank you everybody for joining us for the Information, Advice and Brokerage Workstream workshop, which is going to be, which is indeed going to be a workshop. We're going to have a bit of interaction, so don't think that you're going to be sat there just listening to people for the next hour. We're going to ask you to do a little bit of work with us, which will be very helpful. My name is Andrea, Sutcliffe, for those of you who missed the last session, and I am currently the Chief Executive of the Social Care Institute for Excellence, and on behalf of the TLAP board, I have been leading the work on information, advice and brokerage. And as I said in the presentation that I've just done, one of the reasons why we have this as a work stream is because information is so important in personalisation. And it's absolutely clear from work that Sky has done, that TLAP has done, and that lots of other organisations have done, that actually people find information about social care, they can't find it to start off with, they don't understand it when they do, and it really sort of causes a problem in terms of enabling people to truly make the best out of personalised care. So at TLAP, what we wanted to do was to see what we could do to help, and we've been running this work stream over the last year, coming out with a variety of different things which we're going to talk about later, setting that in the context as well of the new duties that are going to come from the Care Bill, and Bobby from the Department of Health has been landed with a wonderful opportunity to share a bit of information about what's happening from the national perspective. But what we're going to do to start off with is to have the National Co-Production Advisory Group on the couch. And Jo is going to lead us off by introducing two of her colleagues from the National Co-Production Advisory Group. And what they're going to do is just talk through their lived experience of social care services, but with a kind of information bent to it, to set what we're going to do in the rest of this workshop into context. So, take it away, Jo.
Thanks, Andrea. Hi everybody, my name is Jo Hough. I've been a member of the National Co-Production Advisory Group for quite a while, not quite since it started, but for quite some time. My colleagues here will introduce themselves because they're perfectly capable of doing that. So first.
I'm Isaac Samuels. I've been a member of the group for about 18 months. I have a lived experience of mental ill health, and I have a number of physical impairments. I got involved because I felt it was really important that we had the voice of people with a lived experience at policy and at grassroots level.
Thank you.
I'm not yet. I've been given 2 years involved in private. I have adapted 24 years of real experience.
It's Martin Yates. He's been part of the group for about 2 years, and he's got 24 years experience of living independently and employing his own PAs.
Thank you, Martin, that's brilliant. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through some very, well, they're not fixed questions, are they? It's just to start a conversation, really. So Isaac, first, can I come to you? When you think about information, advice and brokerage, what is it about it that's really important for people with impairments and their family carers to be able, how is it important for them to be able to access the service?
I think that we have to, from my experience, it's not the most interesting thing to think about information, advice and brokerage. However, it enables you to make real choice and control. If the information is not accessible or out there, you're not able to make those choices. And I think what's really important, often people searching for those answers using the internet or carers or user networks, or don't even know they have an impairment or don't even know what support they really need. So I think it's really important that we have accessible information for all, because if we're going to talk about personalisation and choice and control, you have to start by getting the basics, and the basics are having information that's accessible, information that's, I suppose, for me what's really important, the information that is actually reliable, because you don't want to kind of find a piece of information and find out you can contact somebody and it's just a dead end. I think it's really important because information for myself has been a real empowering thing.
Thank you, that's a really good point, and I'd just like to say that as a family carer myself with a couple of young boys, without decent information, it's true, you really are not empowered to make the choices that you need to make. So, Martin, the same question to you.
I think for me, it's larger. It's, you know, the information getting person that goes to brokerage. I think it's important for some people to get able to access brokerage who are unable or who don't want to take up the full community and employee period or teaching things out.
So he agrees with Isaac, but on terms of the brokerage, he thinks it's important for people to be able to access that who don't want to take it on for themselves, going down the route of being an employer. Is that right?
Yeah. And it's also important that in the individual personal budget is only allocated to cover that cost.
And then within the personal budget, there is money allocated to cover the cost of the brokerage.
Thank you, there's a really good point there. And actually, moving on from that, Martin, so what services have you accessed personally?
I'm negligible, so we have that careful as being a meal and a quite control thing.
Yeah, well, that's just saying he's never used a broker himself because he's capable of doing that himself. Considers himself a bit of a control freak.
But I work to support people as a broker who are unable for disabilities to cope time or pressure. And yeah, there has been times where I got a number of people around them.
So he has actually worked as a broker helping other people before, but also he's got quite a good network around him of people to help him out when needs be.
Yeah, when you want someone to talk to.
When he wants someone to talk to, some advice.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think they're all really good points, and you know, from my point of view as a family carer, I think I need people around me who I can trust for advice and support. So when it comes to actually getting a broker yourself, if you're not confident, then you need to be able to be sure that that person knows the stuff as well, don't you? Locally. It's really important. Yeah, thank you. So Isaac, what about you? What services are you most commonly accessed?
So if I think back to the time when I first, pre-accessing services, I had no idea what adult social care was. I didn't know what a broker was, I didn't know anything. I just knew that I had a need. I didn't even know what the real need was. I just knew that I wasn't able to do things. So for me it was kind of, where do I go, how do I access the right information, and I'm able to live the life that I want to live. So for me what was really important was to have information that was accessible. And it's, I'm like Martin, I like to be a bit of a control freak, but I'm also really realistic. There's times when I'm not able to manage and I need someone to step in and take that role. So I think it's about having the ability to pick and choose what suits you when you need it. And I think for me, you know, I can imagine when people become older or acquire impairments, or for carers and family members, it's a minefield and you just don't know where to turn. So quality information that supports somebody to make those choices, and it really has reduced a lot of the kind of stress, because it's very stressful, and I know that a lot of my peers that haven't had decent information have ended up, in crisis or, burnt out, and you have to become the expert. But that information can make a real difference, and it just needs to be a leaflet that says, this is what brokerage is, this is what a personal assistant is. It's real simple things, and yeah.
Okay, thanks, Isaac. So For you, what do you think's worked really well, and in what ways?
So I think what's worked really well is, for me, kind of looking at the information I found most appropriate, knowing that it's come from people that have a lived experience, family members and carers, and how it and the information has been from that kind of assets based, rather than looking at people with all these deficits and they can't do this, and it's looking at people more holistically. And I think that's really important because, you know, I really struggle with information at times, because I think, is this really me? Where do I fit into this? I'm a human being foremost, and I need support. And I want information to reflect the views of many different people, and it often doesn't. So it's been really important for me to, you know that the information is produced by people that have a lived experience, but also carers and family members.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Can I just ask, where did you go to find that information?
I believe in the power of peer networks. Somebody said to me, I know somebody that would be able to support you. So I found this person, they came to my house and they showed me a really fantastic website, which was a local disabled persons organisation, and it just answers so many questions, because my social worker was very clear that I needed the support, and he was able to put a package in place, but he wasn't able to tell me, what does this mean, how do I manage it, where to go, what does choice and control. He was like, just fill out a support plan because it will speed up the process. And I just felt things were going so fast I wasn't in control, but the information I got from a local disabled people's organisation was some of the best information I've ever had. And I suppose it's me, I kind of look at my peers and I'm really grateful for that information.
Yeah, I think a lot of families find that they get support from other families, and that's what feels like it works, because it's the most realistic and most relevant information. What about you, Martin? How do you feel about some of the, or what's worked for you and what's worked well?
When I set up mental with the support package 24 years ago, before that, I talked to who
When Martin set up his practice 24 years ago, it was before the direct payment, so we had to have it set up in trust. So we had trustees looking after.
down to her. And then you can check that it goes to back up where it has a problem, or we have difficulty with care, or so there I don't to talk to. The trustees that I knew very well speak over in different ways for many years, and there are trustees that I felt can be very open and be very untouched in company.
So trustees that he knew quite well, and he felt he could talk to them in confidence, and if he was having any problems with any PAs or anything along those lines, they were there to help him with that.
That worked really well.
That worked really well.
Thanks, Martin. I'm guessing that the reason that worked well was because the people knew that you wanted to be in control, and that they would support you rather than...
I've got one I've taken to one trustee who is there if we needed, or he just talked to, and not allowed talking through facilities their fault.
So he's still got one trustee now who's there as a friend, and he can talk to him and just help him sort of facilitate his thoughts and go through things when he's worrying.
That is really helpful. I've got a battle, and then I've got someone to talk to who's not and not getting volume
Yeah.
that who understands what I'm saying.
You're saying it's valuable to him to have someone he can talk to who's not directly involved with his support, but can get sort of an outside view of things and help give him advice on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That sounds absolutely brilliant. And I was just wondering, Isaac, tell me, is there something that an example that you can give us where you found something that you really thought could have been done better? Can you give us something?
Yeah, so I worked with my local authority to ensure that information, advice, brokerage and guidance was embedded in their website. And we really worked hard to make it as simple as possible, because what happened is there were so many barriers that were put up in terms of kind of you had to click here, you wasn't able to go back. So for me it's really important that information, advice and brokerage, and in terms of accessing information, it's really interface with, for me I use software, so I remember trying to fill out this form and it was so frustrating. You wasn't able to pause, you wasn't able to go back, you weren't able to catch what you needed, and at the end of it would say, oh, you needed to contact this person. So I think it's for information to be really smart enough to recognise that people need to take breaks, people don't necessarily know how to answer something, and there's different systems being able to work together. So I think that's really important. So we advocated to have this package, and there was a website called the Stockport website, which I think is really accessible because it kind of signposts you and it's very easy to navigate. And then the local authority decided to embed their corporate brand, and it became less accessible. And I think for me, it's not. There's within the movement a contention around sort of, do we treat people like idiots and give the basic information, or do we embed all the information? I think it's about having options, and for me I want the information to be, quick at hand, signpost me somewhere. If it can't answer the question, give me a person that I can email, and that's really important, because often what you need as a person with an impairment is that evidence to say, well, I've emailed this person, this is the steps that I've taken, these are the processes, and it's often not available.
So actually that last point that you made was about where to go with the information and making someone accountable if it's not working and if it's not doing what it should, or it's giving you the answers you need. And maybe you need someone to contact who's going to resolve that problem for you. So Martin, have you had any experiences where you think something really would benefit from an improvement?
I believe sometimes the process is difficult. The old teacher that way.
Right, dealing with social services is something Martin finds difficult. They don't always communicate in the right way for him.
In terms of, I can't phone calls, so I email privately. And you don't print a bomb to email or...
Martin can't use the phone because of his speech problems in his hands, so he emails as his main form of communication, but he's found that social services don't tend to respond to emails, so that's been a problem for him.
I think also,
I think that's it really. I must admit I've had similar issues around emails, and I've been told sometimes that there's a data protection issue with mentioning names in emails, etc., etc. And I think it's really interesting that there are lots of ways of getting around that sort of thing, and we can all work on that. I think with the technology that we've got these days, there really ought to be ways around all of these issues.
for example, I got 3 weeks ago, send you to come and send data to come now, and you wanted 2 people to come. I emailed 3 on Friday to have 2 people and do it.
He said he got a letter from social services saying they wanted to come round and do a review with him, but they wanted to send 2 people to him. So he's emailed in reply to that to ask why they were wanting to send 2 people. That was 3 weeks ago. He's still not had a reply.
It makes you wonder why, doesn't it? I mean, that's
Yeah.
a request for a straightforward request
Yeah.
for information.
I think
Yeah.
it's a different question.
So there's
Yeah.
lots of room for improvement
Yeah.
there, isn't
Yeah.
there, Martin? Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to say, Isaac? Is there anything? Yes.
I think it's really important that we don't forget advocacy, because information is all well and good, but sometimes we need people to advocate on our behalf. And I've always, even with having the skills and abilities that I do, often or not, the systems won't allow us to be able to access things. So Rhonda is my support worker, and if I email, I don't get a response. If she emails, she gets a response. So we have to know our market, and our market is the market of where we, with impairment, sometimes don't get those responses, and we need advocates, and we need to have that documentation. So I think that the power imbalances need to be kind of addressed, and I found advocacy and information a real empowering thing.
Yeah, thank you. What about you, Martin? Is there anything else you wanted to add?
I'll disagree. Advocacy. Sometimes peer support. You're only for advocate. It seems to have a friend you can talk to, or to advise you, or to, sit with you to it through.
So he agrees with Isaac on the advocacy point, but also adds that he considers peer support very important as well, where someone can be there just to talk to or advise you. It doesn't necessarily have to be a formal advocate.
I think, and just to round up, I can totally concur with that, because as a family carer who has a brilliant network of support families around me, I'd say that that's where I go first.
And also,
For that support.
what I go for is how we should also treat people to make coach to help.
You say he's a member of the National Co-Production Group as well. Probably one of the first places he would turn would be his colleagues within that group.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Isaac, and thank you, Martin, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Has anybody got any more questions? Yeah, anything? Oh, okay. let me come. I think you had your hand up first.
I live in this fine city. I'm a carer, I'm a double carer at this particular stage. And we're talking, I came into this group quite simply because you were talking about advice and information. What's quite interesting in these difficult times is that Birmingham throw lots and lots of money on the subject we're talking about today, advice and information. There is actually service level agreements, organisations that are supposed to give advice and information out. I don't think they've ever got it right. I'm not saying there's not an enormous amount of leaflets or what's happening, but they tend to be saying the same things to the same people. Now the key word that they've completely and utterly failed on over the years is outreach. You've got to go and find people that don't go to these sort of meetings. You've got to go and find Ada and her husband, Bill, who is going to consistently tell you, if you ask them a question, yes, everything is absolutely fine, when it's not absolutely fine. I also get frustrated, nothing is joined up. So if you talk to the Adult and Communities Department in Birmingham, you talk in a certain language that everybody understands. You go into another department within Birmingham and you might as well talk Chinese to them. They don't get it, if you like. So they need to move out of that department and get the other departments, if you like, to understand this whole world, because you're not just talking to one department, but it's not just about throwing large and large amounts of money at it. You do need to get in there and find people, and Birmingham is only just, and I'm questioning whether Birmingham has got this yet, Birmingham is only just starting to look at proper outreach, because if you're not careful, you're going to have the same people in the same rooms, eating the same lunches, every single time, and they use it as an outlet, as a social life, if you like. Whereas going out into the communities, finding these people is the way forward. But trust me, Birmingham spends an enormous amount of money on this word information and advice.
Thank you very much. We'll just hear from Philippa and then see if Joe or anybody wants to come back, and then we'll move on to the next session.
Well, thank you to the panel for really inspiring everyone, I think, about what self-directed support and personalisation means. But I just wanted to ask a question that was put. I'm Philippa Russell, and I chair the Standing Commission on Carers. My adult son has brain damage. Is deteriorating, sadly, physically, but he has a personal budget and he has a very good life. He does a lot of things in the local community. Couldn't be better, and we're well supported. My husband is about to get a personal health budget. He's 81 and he resents greatly the fact that he has suddenly acquired a disability. The peer group operates well for Simon. There is a self-advocacy group well supported and funded in West Sussex to help people make choices. There are good peer networks. There is an organisation of disabled people to give advice on personal budgets, local options. There is also a good network of Parent Carer Forum for carers and a good West Sussex carer support independent body. So, and a long tradition of personalisation. But in a way, what I'm asking comes back to the last speaker. What is the role of the social worker now? I say the good social worker, by which I mean the social worker with knowledge and time and not coping with an emergency. We have a social worker who really explores with anybody moving on to self-directed support what their outcomes are, what they want, where they can get support on local options, and also gets involved in the often quite difficult mediated family conversations about managing risk, about other lifestyles, etc. I think good social work has really helped us and other local families, but I often hear the reverse or the lack of it elsewhere. If we're going to delegate social work responsibilities to good organisations around self-directed care and support, is that okay? What are the criteria? And how do we really get adult social care supporting and informing and advising as a good social work practice suggests?
Thank you very much, Philippa. Does anybody from the panel want to kind of respond to those points? Martin does.
I was once got a campaign. Yesterday we were talking at night about in a majority of social care, social training, they program and personalisation.
We were just discussing in the meeting yesterday, the co-production group, that there was actually in university degrees for social workers, there's very little actually involved there with personalisation. I think they said it was actually up to the individual organisations whether they actually included that or not.
That's something that I'm going to take up.
That's something that Martin's going to take up with the College of Social Work.
Important point about social work training. Isaac?
I think that there's a bigger conversation to be had. I do a number of sessions on a social work training course, and I have to add that we do talk about the inappropriateness of some of these applicants and students, and I think that we need to be honest that social workers have moved from the position of working with a social view to glorified administrators and get social work back on the agenda. We've had to really challenge the university to ensure that personalisation is embedded in the course, because it's not, and I think that we're chipping away at a very big problem here, and if these people are supposed to, enable us to live lives with choice and control, they have to have it on the curriculum. I think that's really important. And I'm just going to pick up on this gentleman's point. What was your name, sorry? Paul. I can't agree with you anymore. I really feel it's important that we don't keep on using this word as hard to reach, seldom heard, when it's the services that are hard to reach, it's the services that are seldom heard. Let's get out there on the streets, because it's the people that don't access the services that often not need the service more, because it's the same old faces, the same old people, and we don't live in, if we're really honest, we don't live in a society where it's about your rights. We live in a society where it's about who screams the loudest, gets the most. So I'm passionate. My colleagues and I, we do tirelessly work at grassroots level.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Anything that you want to finish up with, Jo?
I just want to say that I can only agree with my colleagues, but also to say that I think when it comes to, as you said earlier about empowerment, that information, once it's out there, it does spread, but it often spreads informally. And actually, that can be a really powerful way of getting messages across. So there's huge potential for social media and all of that kind of stuff to be used. And I think we ought to be looking at all of that stuff. And obviously, it's got to be reliable, but I think let's just get the word out there of what's available and what can happen and what's possible for people.
Which I think is a brilliant point to end on from our initial panel from this workshop. Can you join me in thanking Jo? So that was a great start, I think, to us kind of thinking about information advice and brokerage. And I think that what I've taken away from that is that we need information to be accessible and reliable. Absolutely key. The importance of the peer networks and advocacy. I guess there's this thing about personalising the information as well, so actually responding to the needs of people, and I think that picks up your point as well, sir, in terms of actually thinking about who is it that we're trying to get to, and not pretending that actually just chucking a lot of money at it in one way or another is going to kind of resolve that. We've got to maybe be a little bit more creative and imaginative about that. And I think that the training and support for those professionals with whom we're working, obviously absolutely key, and that came out of the pillar for raise about social workers. And the final thing about joining it up, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. We'll come on in a second to the jargon buster, and one of the messages that we've had about that is that we need one that cuts across health and social care and housing and everybody else. Actually, everybody's got their own jargon, and I struggle sometimes in meeting with the jargon that other people use. So what it must be like for folk coming into it must be amazing. So thank you all very, very much for that. And could I ask Bobby to join us at the front, and would my wonderful colleagues like to go and take their seats? Thank you. Bobby is Bobby Pratap. If I said that quite right.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks.
Excellent. Bobby's from the Department of Health and is just going to run us through for a few minutes to set the context of what's happening from the national perspective around information and advice. And he's happy to do that and then take a few questions as well, aren't you, Bobby?
Yeah, that
Wonderful.
sounds good. So thanks, Andrea. I'm Bobby. I work on the Department of Health on the policy team that deals with the Care Bill. And I'm here to talk specifically about the duty in clause 4 of the bill around information and advice. Before I do that, I want to go back to the white paper that was published 2 years ago that sort of hailed information. Like you said, Isaac, it's not necessarily the most exciting sounding policy, but it made it a priority if we're really going to sort of achieve the personalisation agenda. So not first of all, to enable people to even begin to navigate their way through social care, let alone achieving the goal of people being able to control their care and not just simply get what they're given by the state. So going on a couple of years, we've got the duty in the bill in clause 4, which in a way has existed for sort of almost 50 years. There's always been, it's not a new duty, but it exists in various pieces of legislation. They're outdated. Local authorities probably don't really know what their legal duties around information are, which probably explains why they're not necessarily always up to where we would want them to be. So what the bill does, it clarifies what the duty is, it modernises it, brings it all into one place. So what does the bill actually say within that duty? There's probably 4 key elements to it. the first one is how the social care system works, how it operates. So things as simple as what is social care, the fact that you've got to pay for it, what is an assessment, what's eligibility. People that work in social care, these are all normal terms, but if you suddenly end up needing social care, you probably don't know what all of these things are. And the jargon, which the brilliant jargon buster helps, things like personal budgets and direct payments, the service should sort of explain all of these things. The second element is how the social care system operates locally. So what are the choice and the types of care that are available in the local area? The third is about how to help people make plans for the future. So that's probably where things like financial advice will come in, becoming increasingly important with sort of the funding reforms. We hear stories about people who sort of deplete their assets and might have to move into a care home that they don't want to move into necessarily because they've sold their house and they've got no money left. And the fourth element, which is very interesting, we insert, it wasn't originally in the bill, and it was inserted after public consultation, which was that the information and advice has to be both accessible and proportionate. And hearing what we've heard here today, I'm happy that that's in there, because what Paul was saying, being accessible means reaching sort of people, people who are maybe socially isolated, people from BME communities who don't normally come into contact with social care services. And again, being proportionate, what Martin was saying. So maybe producing leaflets is very good for some people, but not for others. Maybe online is great, but we've heard many older people tell us that they don't necessarily know how to use online services. If you don't want to deal with your situation by phone, then emails should be available, I think it's fair to say, in 2013. And the thing about data protection, I'm unconvinced by that. I think a lot of the time it's used as a get out, to be honest. So they're the four sort of key high-level duties in the bill. I've been asked to sort of briefly mention about the money that's attached to it. So there's £32.5 million over the next 2 years going towards this duty, and that's capital money, which is to be spent specifically on online services and improving online provision. So hopefully, things like you said about making the interface, things like that, making the interface on websites better and making the information better generally online. And then separate from that, there's 62.5 million. Well, the money is already going into councils, a very small amount this year, and it's increasing year by year. When by 2017-18, it will be 62.5 million recurring funding going in every year to council budgets. We haven't set out nationally exactly how we think that should be spent, but it is for independent advice and brokerage and things like that. So I'm sure there'll be more work done with guidance at a national level to set out how we think maybe local authorities might want to spend that money. So I'll give you a quick update on how the bill was going and the passage through Parliament. We went through the Lords Committee stage in June where peers scrutinised it very thoroughly. I can let you know that the clause on information and advice was by far the longest debate throughout the bill. It was an hour and a half, which was much longer than anything else really. And even after the clause was debated, every sort of other clause pretty much, there was always a link back to information advice when you're talking about funding reform or direct payments or safeguarding. Everything, and information sort of underpins the whole set of care and support reforms. The two sort of points of controversy, or of debate, if you will, on the information were first on financial advice. Peers told us that they thought that the bill doesn't go far enough in terms of financial advice. Many wanted local authorities to have to actually have a mandatory referral to a regulated financial advisor, which the department doesn't quite agree with as the best approach, but we're looking at how we can maybe make more explicit in the bill how local authorities can meet their duties around financial advice. And the second, which was mentioned here, was advocacy. We've made clear in the bill that advocacy is a way of meeting somebody's needs. It should be or could be part of somebody's care package, but we've heard that earlier than that in the assessment and the care planning processes that there's a gap probably in the bill, and we've been working very hard over the summer with sort of organisations like the Care and Support Alliance and the Equality and Human Rights Commission on who could benefit most from advocacy in those processes and when they could need it. Very quickly, the bill, just to sort of give you a look into the future, the bill will finish up in the Lords, hopefully in October, before it moves into the Commons, and it, with fingers crossed, should get royal assent and become an act in April 2014, or maybe May. And then a year after that is when the provisions in the bill will start to take force, with the exception of funding reform, which will come into place a year later in April 2016. So, but before the bill comes into force in April 2015, there's a huge programme of work going on about producing the regulations and guidance, and that's where we'll be able to. So the bill sets out a really high-level principles of what the care and support system should look like, but the guidance will really drill down into how local authorities can meet their duties. And we hope to work with organisations like TLAP and Sky, and if anyone wants to get involved, I think the biggest strength of this bill is how it's been co-produced, and it's all the better for it, and we don't want to lose that when we're doing the regulations and guidance. So perhaps afterwards, if anybody's interested in joining any of the groups that will be developing the regulations, there won't be regulations for information, but there'll be a set of statutory guidance, then we'd be pleased to work with you. So that's, I want to put a plug to the TLAP principles, because I think when you're looking at guidance for local authorities, you can't really. I think that's going to be a pretty good starting point for where we go with the guidance for the bill. So that's a very quick rundown of the sort of the duty, and I'd be happy to take any questions that anyone has.
Oh, Rob, you got in there so quickly.
I'll just shout.
We're just making sure that Linda gets her exercise today. That's all.
Thanks very much, Andrea. Rob Gregg from the National Development Team for Inclusion. Two things, if I may. One is just on advocacy, and your last things you said there. Can I put in a plea for some joined-up government? We've just been commissioned by the Office for Disability Issues to do some work for them on generating information to advise on the shape of advocacy for people with disabilities. And it sounds very similar to what you're saying, some of the stuff might go in your thing. So please, can we have some joined-up government? Because I suspect those two parts haven't spoken to each other. I don't know this because somebody used to work around government. The second thing, which also got missed in the first section, and I want to flag up, what's going to be the requirement for the information advice to be helpful? By which I mean, if I give you an example, we just finishing doing some work around employment support for people with disabled people. The clear evidence from this research is that 2/3 of what local authorities are spending the money on in terms of employment supports don't have any evidence that they help get people jobs. So the information needs to say two things. First of all, is this type of support, in this example employment support, actually likely to get the outcomes because there's a national evidence base? And secondly, what's the local evidence that it works? Because again, if we look locally, for spending 100,000, the number of jobs people get from ostensibly similar services varies from 1 to 100 people. So what are the requirements that the information advice will tell people whether services are helpful and deliver what they're supposed to deliver?
Cracking
Thank you, Rob.
questions. Go on.
I think so first of all, on the advocacy, probably hold my hands up and say I wasn't aware of that piece of work that's going. We worked very closely with the sector, but that's a good point, and I'll take that away about getting in touch with the Office of Disability Issues about that. And I think that might come sort of, as I was saying before, and similarly to the point about information being high quality and helpful and actually having, you know, not just being there but being useful. That's, I mean, the duties in the bill are very, very high level. They're only sort of a few paragraphs, and the guidance is where we'll set that out. So again, the TLAC principles thing, which I don't know if we're going to sort of use as a skeleton or we're going to rip off a bit maybe for the guidance, where it says that the information needs to be clear, it needs to be helpful, it needs to be, and then there needs to be evaluation of the service and whether it was useful, and that will come probably a few years down the line. And on advocacy sort of as well, we will probably set out, and I think that's where the link with that work in DWP may be happening, is that there will be sort of a role in the regulations or guidance about advocacy and where, you know, exactly how it should be done. So thank you for that tip off, really.
Thank you very much. It's great that TLAC is enabling joined-up government. Thank you.
I've got loads of questions for you, but I'll limit it to 2 points. Because, I mean, the bill will be slightly hard if it just said local authority must rather than local authority may. But my main point is, in Birmingham, there are a lot of people that get direct payment, but there are an awful lot of people that are scared by the term employer. So I think in terms of linking it back to the previous session, I think the meaning of a term and the implementation of that term locally is a much important, because a lot of people aren't getting direct payment because they don't want it, because of the employer terminology that's used within that. So, and that is a big issue in Birmingham. Not for people like me who are mad and don't want to do it anyway, but for people who have an interest but don't really know whether they really want to go through with it because of that reason.
Thank you.
Well, that's really interesting to know that people sort of aren't taking up direct payments just because, you know, they might not understand the terminology and they might not sort of know how it will, you know, how to use it. But I mean, so the first thing I guess is that everybody who wants one from April 2015 will have a right to a direct payment, and information again absolutely is getting the information right about what a direct. I'm sure a lot of people don't even know what a direct payment is, and I know for a fact even people working in the Department of Health don't know what the difference between a personal budget and a direct payment is, and people sort of confuse the two and think they're the same thing. So there is this what Clinton was saying outside, that we're kind of, the bill is kind of a big step, but it's only words on paper, and implementation is the real challenge. And what you said about the duties in the bill, I think in all of clause 4 at least, everything is a must for local authorities. There's no, as far as I can remember, mays. So it is, you know, hopefully by clarifying the duties, local authorities will be able to deliver a bit better.
Okay, and one final, it's our panel as
I'm going to let him finish again. I think there's a need for people on diapers to be able to access proper employment advice. I think the lady again will cover the nowhere to go. I got to in Issac, work for the proper advice.
He thinks that it's important for people on direct payments to be able to access proper employment advice, and in his experience, ACAS haven't given appropriate advice they've given wrong advice.
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely agree, Martin. I think one of the most important bits that we're going to need to address in the guidance is how the social care department, their information and advice service, links up with all the other related, so employment, absolutely, and benefits, and things like education, things like health as well. So we've heard repeatedly that people want to know about continuing healthcare, things like that. So that's not on the face of the bill about integrating, but there is, in clause 3, there's a duty to integrate with other services, and that absolutely includes employment services.
Thank you very much. Can we join together to say thank you to Bobby for Bobby's going to be around obviously for the rest of this workshop and then for the rest of the day. If you have any other burning questions or kind of want to advocate for anything that you particularly want to see in the regulations or the guidance, then Bobby's your man, and he'll be very happy to chat with you. All of that is all set to lead us into thinking about the work that Think Local Act Personal has been doing to try and help this process go forward. So in the things that we've been doing and that we'd just like to kind of dwell on for a few seconds is to think about what could help around all of this. So one of the things that we've heard on a regular basis is that the information that people provide is full of jargon, we don't understand it. So we have a social care jargon buster. They're all on your tables. If you haven't seen it before, please take it out. We have 52 of the most commonly used words in social care in the jargon buster. And we could have obviously done more, but we stuck at 52 because that meant it was one for each week. The thing for us to think about now is what's going to be the best way to use this information as we've currently got it and take it forward. So we have had, we've been working in the workshops in York and in London over the summer, and people have kind of said various things to us. They would like it. I'd like us to make it a living and growing document. So actually, yes, we've got 52 words, and that is, nice and easy to remember, one for every week of the year. But actually, there are lots of other words that other departments use that actually we could use. We could make it into a searchable web page and sort of have it accessible on the website, so that people could actually kind of cross-refer to it very easily, so that people can actually start using it in a different way. We could expand it to very clearly cover health and actually work with colleagues in health and people who are using services in both social care and health to expand it. There's been a lot of tweets today saying, well, we should just not be using jargon at all, and let's kind of get to using it using kind of plain English. And one of my thoughts, and I'll hang on to this one, is that we could use this as a kind of social care version of a French-English dictionary. So actually, we have the word that's the social care jargon, but we have the word which is actually what the rest of us use in every common day language. And actually, we try and develop it in a way that people use the common everyday language rather than the jargon. So those are some of the thoughts that we've had, and we'll give you a couple of minutes to think about whether you've got any other suggestions for that. Bobby has been talking quite a lot about this, which is our principles, and again you've got that there. And the principles were really about saying local authorities are going to have this duty. What would we really want to see in terms of the way they discharge that duty? And when Paul Gerstow was launching the white paper, he had this challenge from the floor at the King's Fund conference, with somebody saying, well, how do we know that actually the information that's being provided is any good? Which sort of comes to Rob's point, but not entirely. And I was desperately trying to see whether we were kind of saying, is it evidence-based? And I guess it's in the quality standards bit. So, a little bit, but maybe we could make that stronger. But what could we do with these principles? We put out there's a lot of work that local authorities are going to be doing. We've already heard that local authorities are using money, but are they using the money in the right way to actually make sure that the information and price is right? So people have said, we could use these principles as a template for an information and price strategy. We could produce tools and guidance and practical examples to support each of the principles. We could use it to actually kind of encourage health and wellbeing boards and local authority councillors to kind of be challenging their officers in the way that they're implementing this. So sort of top 10 tips for health and wellbeing boards to ask. And we maybe need to think about how can we use this to support different people in the workforce. So Philippa was asking a question about social workers, but there's lots of other people who we're working with who might find that useful. The other thing that we've also heard about information is that, and here is an example, the map of how people get into social care is incredibly complex, and there are different ways of doing that, and we've created, it's interactive on the website at the moment, and Independent Age did a lot of the work on this with us to develop it, to identify how people come into the system, the questions that they may be asking, where the information is, are there pinch points where actually at the moment the information is not quite as accessible as we would want it to be. Now I think it's a very useful kind of document as we've got it at the moment, but what could we use that for in the future? Could we develop it into some sort of a tool that local authorities could use to audit what they're doing, to kind of do a bit of self-assessment, or that other people could hold them to account to? Could we make it available as a public sort of interactive signposting tool? And again, could we expand it to include health services? And then last but not leastly, we have been developing case studies where we're going to be we asked for not necessarily good practice examples, but just examples of what people are doing around information advice and brokerage. And we're going to be working with 6 councils to kind of get really into the weeds of this and really find out how they went about it, what they did, what didn't go so well that actually we could learn from, as well as what went well. And again, what are the things that we could be asking of those case studies? When we did the workshops in London and York, one of the things that came through an awful lot was actually wanting to have business cases coming out of the case studies. So us being able to give people a template to say, well, actually, this is what you can use in the future. And needing to make sure that we share and learn the ideas that come out of those case studies.